Carl, you played that really well, and I'm not trying to insult you as a player when I say this, but goddamn, those are some of the best draws I've ever seen in a Tzimisce deck. Period.
You gotta put the cards in there. Yeah, that was fun. My actual goal was to go Child of the Revolution, but Hugh's early intercept and then his wrecking my Mary Elena on the block, like basically threw that plan out.
Yeah, I know it bought me. It was directly why I got 3 extra turns in the game. Like, I was dead easily 2 turns earlier.
Yeah, although, I mean, I honestly wasn't coming forward turn or so because setup. But yeah, there's like 7 manses in here because I'm like, babies get manses free. And I'm playing like a bunch of Form of the Bat. Yeah. So, like... Yeah. And I'm playing the Sculpt the Flesh, which is free ag. So yeah, you block an empty baby hunting. It's got protean on it. It might still send you to torpor. So like that was the whole concept here. It's just sort of a fun take on, and it's, you know, everything in here is in V5, so you know it's totally doable in V5. Yeah, I really like the Sculpt the Flesh as the Donnybrook replacement, so you know, because it's free, and these guys can use it. So it's the Revolutionary Council.
Sure, why not try?
Why not? Like I could end up in a game where I've got the most votes, and all of a sudden, that looks pretty good. So yeah, I had that council when I pitched the edge to try to stop the vote, but I was holding it because I'm like, if I can get rid of
what? Sorry,
if I can get rid of Mithras and all the votes, there's still a way. And then I drew the.
You keep cutting out. Like, you drew
the fee stake, and so with the fee stake, I thought, oh, maybe I actually oust votes bleeds, but then I did. Yeah, things worked out, and I was able to keep it, and that was enough to that and the earth meld. I gave me enough actions to, you know, clear the house here. But I mean, Hinez was in a tough position because he's got to try to get a turn against me after
you're cut out the whole thing there.
The Pentex was the only move he could make. So like I get that, and it just didn't pay out for you because I was able to, you know.
Well, without the Pentex, I think you wouldn't have gotten me.
Quite probable. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you only had one wake, so I guess. Yeah.
She was unlocked. But well, yeah, I hadn't the best draw anyway.
Yeah.
And it annoys me kind of because this is solely my fault, whatever problem. I had the Power Base, Smiling, and Antediluvian Awakening at least for 3 turns. And because I was managing so much of the unlock stuff, I forgot to use my Master Phase, which annoyed me a bit. Yeah. But this wouldn't have changed the outcome, I think.
Yeah, I think overall, though, just mentioning the deck that I was playing, I'm actually largely happy with it. I think the draw was very, very poor, but I think there's some interesting things working in its favor. I would have liked to have seen at least one opportunity to tap the Island of Yaros for something, but you can't control who's before you and who's behind you. So I think that's really the biggest pain for the deck this game.
But what I wanted to ask, is how often you, like when building V5, how often do you have the impulse to get cards into which are not V5?
Well, I have the impulse to add an Maskin to my deck. But yeah, it's not that important, even though it really helps the deck. And of course, some DIs.
Yeah.
Two things which I don't expect will ever make V5. I actually built my deck not V5 first, and then I said, what can't I put in here? And it was only about 4 cards away. And so I said, what would be the right V5 equivalents for this? That's how I ended up putting a fee stake in, because I had a little space, which I think I didn't end up needing, but might have made a difference if I had gotten earlier with Mithros's votes. But yeah, it was like a DI, which I couldn't have, and I think an NRA pack, which I couldn't have, and otherwise I was like, yeah, this thing is really good just with the V5 cards. So,
and I was like, I mean, how hard is it for you as seasoned players, like playing the game for ages, to restrict you on the card pool? Because that's something, when talking about the V5 in Discord, a lot of them like, but I can't use card X. Why should I limit myself?
So if you've already done everything anyway, right? Why don't you want to do different challenges and try and stretch stuff, right? I quite like that. It's like, what can you make it work? Which is why, yeah, okay, I do like telepath tracking, as commented in the game quite a lot. And it's nice that's in there. I can use that. And I think it's... I might know what I want to do with that deck. Which is basically just stop this pesky form of mist. I can do that. I don't really need anything else added to that. I also want to see are the decks we're building. So, like, you know, we've built a lot of starters, and there's 4 more starters coming later in the year, right? And loads of people have input into them, like playtesters and everything else. And they are designed for a lot of people. They'll buy them and they won't buy anything else, and that is what they're going to play with. Like, I've talked to people at conventions, I've get emails from people about, I just want to add a little bit more, what's the way to tweak this, right? So it's nice to be able to see things that people are trying to do stuff and try and still make it creative. So I think I actually find that like nicely challenging, and stops me just using the same thing. And I think I mentioned it before. I did this cool talk in Stockholm a long time ago about modular deck building, which is something I still use when I'm lazy or don't have enough time, right? So, like, here's this module that works. So at that stage, you still had Asher tablets being quite broken, liquidation, etc. So you could have that master module, and then you could stick like an Amazon module, and you could make Nosferatu anti-tribute and Nosferatu even stronger than they already are by adding that kind of Asher tablets and liquidation module to that. And I like being able to see, you know, can I take a blood sorcery module, which I know works with group 2-3 Tremere, of how I want to do it and how I want to do different things. Can I bolt that in to the kind of the V5 Tremere, and, you know, can I bolt that on to Banu instead of using you know, theft? Can I do something else with them to make it a bit more interesting? And then different cards for different reasons, right? Because I would prefer torporizing vampires rather than leaving them empty. If that makes sense. Hit hard or go home.
But if they are empty, they cannot play reaction cards.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for that.
But what if they're empty and in torpor? What about second breakfast?
I know. Yeah, exactly. Second breakfast. So I think it depends, right? I mean, you're not gonna. There are people who really like being able to do what they want with the cards they want, and that's fine. I guess the point of something like V5 is it doesn't take away their options. They're still able to do that if they want. It's about adding a different option for other people and seeing how they interact and what that comes out of that. What creative stuff do you get used out of that? Some of the most creative, weirdest stuff I've ever seen has been in draft, particularly when, some of it's with very abusive draft text. Anything that unlocks you in draft, like particularly bits of equipment that move along. The kind of people going, "Oh, this Derby dance thing. Oh, this is what this means." Like, yes, that is it. But you don't have to use imbued and edge explosion or whatever. You can do all sorts of different things to make these things work. I do think that's quite a creative way of thinking because you do different things. Yeah, even if it is just reaction cards cost more blood to play, so you can't actually play them, which is really disappointing.
Yeah, and having deck building constraints is a way to increase or to exploit your creativity. So you need constraints for that.
Yeah, I would agree. There's a big reason, as was stated, that like draft feels meaningful is because it lets you be able to experience something that, like, in constructed, your brain's going to default to, why would I do something inefficient when I can do something that is efficient? But if you kind of like deny your natural impulse to do that, then you end up with this ability to have discovery that you might not otherwise have. I reference Magic a lot when looking at this game, and I know they're not the same game in any stretch of the imagination. But bear with me in this example. But Magic becomes a very stale format, even though there's plenty of options to choose from in the bigger level competitive events, Modern, Legacy, etc. And it largely becomes that way because people just become so affixed to this deck being the deck because the meta says this. But if something were to try to do something different, if somebody were to taste something else, they might realize there is an alternative. And sometimes it takes pretending that something doesn't exist or making yourself feel the thing that doesn't exist to realize, oh, hey, this might also be relevant in other ways. And V5 gives you that ability to say, like, let's take a look at this card pool, like, separate from the rest of the unit and see, like, maybe there's something here so my brain isn't stuck thinking, oh, well, I have to play Unmasking, or I have to be able to have DI, or I can't be successful.
On the opposite end of that, knowing that there's no DI in the format is kind of refreshing in that I know every card I play works,
Yes.
right? The cancellation we have is delaying tactics, which is fine, because we've had to get to a point where there's the referendum is good. I don't just get rid of that vote out of hand.
Mm-hmm.
And the DI is always like, well, I'm planning my turn. At what point is someone likely to DI me? How would I survive that? Is the thought you have in normal constructed, right?
Yeah.
Like, can I make this lunge if I get DI'd in the middle of it? Can I do this if there's a life boon? Like, what happens, right? And not having those tools in V5 does make it a little more clean in that everyone has a sense of where the table's at. Yeah, I've got eagle sight potential blocks and delaying tactics, and those things can mess up my turn, but those are easier to understand and plan around. And I think the table as a whole has a better sense of that, which means you look at what I had on the table without playing any cards, and you're like, well, Carl can bleed me for 6 when you were still in the game, Steve. And without any cards, right?
Mm-hmm.
And unless, and there's going to be no magic DI of my stealth or whatever, or a magic DI of my conditioning if you don't block. Like, it's you've mathed it. It's pretty easy. It's straightforward. And I think in a lot of ways, that straightforwardness is actually a benefit. Because, DI slows down the game. People are trying to figure out when they should be playing that DI to get its maximal effect, right? And, asking for DIs on important actions and making sure that things go the way you want. It just takes time away from a game which is, already complex. So I really enjoy the fact I don't have to worry about those types of cards.
Between every
What's that?
play, the mythical pause step between every play to see if someone's going to DI.
Yeah.
I do think so. On the cancellations, just to mention, right? So there's no real reason why like approximation and hide the mind aren't in. They're less good to put in a starter that you'll try give to new players, right? But there's nothing intrinsically wrong with them because you're playing them in the flow of the moment, which I'm much more easy with in terms of how that interacts with the overall game state. And approximation, I think, would be great because poor Mithras. Like if he could call a vote that wasn't delayed, that would really help.
Yeah,
teach these people in such small cap.
I think I agree a lot with you there as well, Carl. Like, it is nice to have what isn't basically the greatest counterspell in any game you've ever played. A one life, counter a spell, draw a card, and stop your opponent from doing literally whatever it is they were doing in the rest of the turn. My question though is why did you guys feel like sudden was within the acceptable boundaries then if DI felt kind of off, considering how many cards that are masters can really be the entire shape of a deck?
I guess it's where it's played, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Playing the masters, it's tight relatively. You're boom, boom, boom. Okay, and I do remember certainly playing back in 94 and 95, where you'd end up with, because we played a lot of Magic relatively, you ended up with chain suddens and things like that. And probably maybe getting some of that wrong. It doesn't really matter. Can't prove it either way anymore. But yeah, it's kind of alright, I think, for most players. It can get a bit complicated, more complicated when they see. I still have this question on the list of things I get asked at events, like between Wash and Sudden, of like, oh, can I play another Master now with Sudden? It's like, no. So I think that's an interesting one. But I think there's been some chat on the Discord about how to make different cancellation effects more obvious. It is a bit of a weird one example, right? Like if something's cancelled, by default you're paying the cost. It's just that most of the cancellation effects say you don't.
Right.
So that was a strange one. It almost would be better being the other way around.
Well, and the other thing is actions, because they're paid when they resolve, never pay, regardless of what the cancellation says, whether it refunds or not, because you haven't paid. And so that's another like loophole in the way that cancellation is thought about, because they're like, well, I don't pay for this, do I pay for that? In this case I refund, in that case I don't. But from a non-internal to BCP standpoint, my thought on sudden was, well, I have to give up something really important to stop your master phase, right? And if masters are important, I'm giving up an important thing to stop your important thing. Whereas DI is like, well, I'm giving up an important thing to stop literally anything. And that is a much wider range, right? And so, yeah, I think approximation and hide the mind makes sense there in flow of actions, as you said. So I totally would favor adding those cards. And it sounds like you're thinking about doing that. So hide the mind was in the draft kit.
Yeah, it is.
I don't know if it'll stay because I'm not sure it made sense there, but
approximation actually probably makes more sense, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because that's actually that's a nice counter to someone plays Awake and you've spent additional pool to get a higher capacity vampire out. That's kind of fine in draft because you want people to die, and it just helps.
So I think Carl touched a little bit on what more of the question I was asking was, but like in terms of the interruptiveness of it, right? It's bordering on impossible to like. I double checked. I don't remember there being maybe if I'm wrong here, somebody correct me, but I don't believe there's a card that just deliberately destroys location as a master.
I was looking for that one. Unnatural disaster.
Was it unnatural? Yeah. I don't know why I couldn't find that. I was trying to find the card and it wasn't coming up when I was searching. There it is. Okay, but that's 2 pool. That's what I thought I'd remembered. But that's 2 pool that you're going to be paying to do that. Whereas with a sudden, it's about timing. Do you guys feel like a card like Unnatural Disaster is essentially overpriced if sudden can be free, or does the timing feel like it's worth 2 pool?
Yeah, it's overpriced.
Okay.
It's overpriced, but I was considering adding it to my deck, even though I couldn't, but it came to mind. Yeah.
Because
I did it on that kind of thing.
Yeah, the ability to destroy a key location is worth 2 pool.
Ventru, I think, want that card if they're voting because they cannot afford New Carthage to be on the table.
Mm-hmm.
And they have no way to destroy it otherwise because they're never going to get through organized resistance to destroy it. And they're more likely to play Dominate Kind, which has no effect on the card because it doesn't matter where on the table the New Carthage is, it still works for the Bruja. So yeah, I mean it's a card that has a definite place. I think Ventru vote decks are
other place I've seen a lot in is things like Top Dog decks for those pesky Grand Madres and Secure Havens.
But I feel like
generally got that pull.
I feel like ultimately it's still a very valuable card even outside of those decks. It's just if you're willing to play a sudden, the vast majority, I guess not the vast majority, but a significant number of the cards that you play that are masters are going to be locations that are going to be meaningful cards to rip out. But it seems like the consensus is at least that Unnatural Disaster is a little overpriced, or was that what all 3 of you kind of agreed on?
I think so. I'm not sure we'll change though. So like you have to have specific reasons for us to change a card, right? Because we get told off either way.
Correct.
But so some of the cards that have gone up on POD, we've changed a relatively small portion of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right, we've added the odd stealth, reduced the odd card cost. So whatever is some of the abyss, reduce it. I mean, that could probably reduce another half point at least, kind of thing. And some of it's difficult, like stuff like Renegade Guru, clearly overpriced. Right. 5.4 for a Guru, but there are ways to obviously make it work. Ariadne goes eats the world with Guru, whatever, great, but it's not necessarily straightforward, and the game isn't perfectly mathematically balanced. It never was. And it's still, I mean, like Dark Sovereigns is the easiest example of that. It's not easy. I think with something like that, like I hate Trifles. I think Trifle I liked Coven by itself, but I think the adding Trifle to too many cards like Vessel and Villain are mistakes. Cards that are just you're going to play all the time anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Iron Oran, sure, go ahead. And plenty of other cards, but Unnatural Disaster, perfect fit for Trifle because you're spending 2 pool to do something big, but it doesn't really advance your own game, so you still then get to do potentially, if you've drawn it, something else for your own game. That is probably more reasonable.
It feels like Trifle is the definition of what we were talking about, the theoretical half pool at least when it comes down to master cards, which is why I agree with you on Vessel and Villain, where it's a very much so like nothing makes these cards specifically Trifle because they're actually more valuable as Trifles in that way, the way their effects function. Did I phrase that well? I feel like the look makes it feel like I phrased that poorly. Okay.
I think Carl's just saying if he disagrees. I mean, he hates Vessel, which is fair enough.
Vessel has a place in some decks. I think it's overused by a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the mistake that new players make with Vessel is believing that it is
free,
a tool to recoup to recoup pool. It is not. Like it takes 3 turns to recoup the pool, because you can't get anything off of it. Then you break even, and then you finally gain a pool back from your expense on the vampire that you played. And so I think that new players particularly see that, and they're like, oh, well, I can take away someone else's resource and I get a resource, and I'm gonna, and I'm gonna manage my pool. And I'm like, well, you're not. Like, and a lot of people play, the blood doll is played, but not as much. And so that part of Vessel has almost no effect in a lot of games. So you're basically paying for the trifle and the delayed recoup of the pool. And in a lot of decks, that's not what you want to do. You'd rather either just say, I don't want to recoup the pool in that way, or I'd rather just play a Villain and just take 2 once. Like, so there's, in decks like Jan was playing, Vessels make some sense, because it helps you if you get in weird unlock positions, which happens. You can miscalculate.
Get killed by Jack real easy.
You theoretically have the extra pool in your pocket if you played the blood doll over the Villain, but in reality, when your pool's lower, you can't get parity shifted cross table, other things can't happen. So that pool not actually being in your pool in that case is sometimes helpful. But yeah, Vessel is, it's okay. I think it gets overused by a portion of the, players.
I think the question should be, do I want to manage something in my unlock phase, like my deck was doing in the last one, or do I want to recoup pool? Mm-hmm. And then it should be, or rather a blood doll, because I think just putting in ways to recoup, it's important, sure, but if the deck does not flow as naturally, and if you get the better flow if you leave it out, that might be the option to choose, instead of just putting in trifles just for the sake of it.
I think that's summed up very well, though. I largely agree with the way both of those explained. I would argue that it should be more of a, if you need to manage pool during your unlock, because I do think that like the proclivity for people to choose Vessel makes Blood Doll feel less playable, even though Blood Doll is not. Blood Doll is literally gain a pool, like take a blood, gain a pool. So even if somebody does burn your blood doll, you still got value, and you potentially got value out of the person feeling the need to play the Vessel to burn your blood doll. But there's so much more value you can get out of blood doll over a very short period of time. Again, like we talked about earlier before we started the game, like one pool and the movement of one pool between anything is such a valuable commodity. The movement of blood is almost as valuable as the blood itself. And Blood Doll does that, and Vessel really does not. It's pushing you at least 1 to 3 turns behind.
Well, the new Power Base Munich preview that we got is, like similar to the old Power Base. God, which one is it? That the Giovanni had. But it's it's like a blood doll. It's like a blood doll for anybody that you've got, and that's pretty hot. So that gives you a lot of options. Hinez, I wanted to ask you, you were pretty thin on blood there. Have you been experiencing, like, I don't know how much you're playing La Sombra stealth
This
bleed
this
stuff.
was the first time I was playing this deck, so I didn't add many cards that work well for my Vampires to Gain Blood. For example, I just added the Hunting Ground, the Giant's Blood, and Jake, and that was it. I should have added Life in the City, a few Life in the City, perhaps. So I don't really need to recover blood. My Vampires need the blood.
Yeah.
I didn't want to add the Coven because of Consigned to Oblivion and Where the Veil Thins.
Fair.
So, yeah.
Steve is seeing me play a version that's, of course, not V5, and I was using Redirection, at which I know a lot of players don't like, but I really favor in that type of deck because all my vampires should be locked. Why do I want to pay the blood on top of the fact that I need to be using that? Yeah,
I would have tossed in a few redirections if they wouldn't be V5.
Yeah. Is there thought that redirection will make V5 given bait and switches prevalence?
I like it. I have no issues with it. It's far less. It's just finding a spot. I also still quite like the Clint artwork, and it's fine to use. But that's partly because I have a stack of like 100 signed ones to give away at some stage.
See, if we had random boosters, you could shove some of those signed ones in.
I could.
They are I don't remember, but they're also the Salubri, Tsumishi, and Ravnos new block decks coming. So sometime this year, and the Sabat. I don't remember.
I can't remember either. People are asking, it's like, I have to open these files. They won't open my phone.
I could check.
So when's the Sabat coming? Any date set? Since it got
let's not make any guarantees.
Yeah.
Because it's not 100% complete yet. But
what do you guys feel like the likelihood is for this year, even on it?
Oh yeah, they'll be out this year.
But, the Ravnos, Tsumishi, and Celebrate new block decks are already done. I mean, they just need to be sent to the printer when the time comes.
Yeah, and maybe some French translation still as well on them.
And Spanish. Well, yeah, I'm sure the Spanish one is done as well. So yeah.
How much does it cost to expedite them coming out? Because I feel the Salubri. I really just need a handful more cards to fill them out.
Clone Vincent. I mean, part of this is timing, right? So I think we mentioned this before. We just can't. We try our best as a small-sided desk company, as I like to phrase it, but we'd probably have issues if we tried to do 5. I mean, and maybe we can look at other things, but it just becomes more and more expensive. The idea is to try and keep things cheap, relatively, and accessible. Without
we have been managing to produce several products this year.
Yep.
So,
I mean, you guys have been doing a great job. That this is by no means me saying, "Hey, do better."
I know. Yeah. It's only natural that players want more. I mean,
yeah, but I feel
sometimes we juggle. Yeah.
I just want the Salubri to be just this much. It's so close.
Yeah.
What do you want to know about the Salubri?
So one of the things that I feel like is missing from them is like, how do I put this? There's something clunky about the way that it feels to play them in their current state. And some of it feels like an issue of action mobility, like being able to do enough at times. And also like the action modifier the action modifier set they have currently does something feels wrong with going through the action steps, but then also still being available to properly defend in a meaningful way. And it feels like these are things that old Salubri were able to do that current Salubri don't do very well. So it feels like there's like a missing link here to make the Salubri feel more like the Salubri and less like the Venture Anti-Tribu.
There's some combat cards which I think will probably do that.
Yeah. Okay. I want one that's a reaction. I want a Fortitude reaction card that is nearly as good, if not as good, as an Obtenebration reaction card to Wake.
Those guys are in the shadows, man. They're hiding out.
But they already have Eyes of Argus. I mean,
yeah, but Fortitude's better. I'm not saying this because I'm a Ventrue player and trying to just sneak cards for Ventrue into the Salubri. Never do that. No. Forget I said that.
Yeah, but the new block decks will give some different approaches or the possibility to play those clans in a different way.
Nice.
I think that's
As
nice
usual.
because
I think reacted card is in one of the new blood, depending on whether this is Ben's final version of it.
Which one?
Redacted card is in one of the new blood.
I love statements like that so much. I love let me give you no information and no information. Okay, yay.
Yeah, it's not worth my life to
annoy
Ben.
Yeah.
It's just funny.
What was the other? Oh yeah, redacted other card, which was on the list from previous thing.
Wait,
that's in as well. That's good.
Ooh,
and that one.
That sounds a little more like an actual hint for me.
Well,
from other lists.
The event I went to. Where was it? Last weekend? Yeah. So in Leeds, there's somebody running like an Enkidu Raptor deck, and he was doing actions to get his Raptors done like every so often when he ran up pack alphas, and it's like, oh, you want to do them unblockably? Was what I was basically telling him. And there's a couple of ways of doing that with the skill set that Enkidu has. A few ways, in fact. One of those cards should hopefully come back.
Interesting.
I hope it's animalism.
Let's not make any
yeah, no
He's just hoping. He's just hoping.
All right. So for the audience, we've got these ways to make an action unblockable. We can start enumerating them.
Yeah. Although when's the audience going to even see this video at this rate? So
yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, hold on. We're changing the draft kit again. Hold on. Let's change the draft kit one more time.
Well, okay, this one's an expensive card. And it's not Day Operation, which is Day Operation. Did we put that in already?
I thought it was in already. Am I?
No, Day Up's in the draft kit.
Dawn Up is the one that's in right now. Right.
There's no Daring the Dawn either, is there?
No, Dawn Up isn't either. For some reason, I thought Dawn Up was.
We'll be definitely adding more Fortitude cards to B5.
Yeah, because the Fortitude is a bit remedial at the moment, right? It's just, it is what it is. There's nothing. Yeah. There aren't many sexy Fortitude cards anyway.
There aren't.
Yeah, Daring the Dawn's in, but and I think Day Up is in the draft kit, if I remember the draft kit list correctly.
I have one of those signed by Rush before he died.
Oh.
In the same year, actually.
Lost a lot of good artists at quite young ages.
Yeah.
But I think I mean, I don't play much Fortitude, but
weak.
Is it the same, like one-dimensional thing, like with Potence?
Yeah, so it does have some of that issue, right? But even the combat cards, they do different things, and people use them in different percentages. And some of that optionality has been reduced.
Yeah,
like Resilience, I think, is the one that people keep harassing me for, because that's quite a reasonable card to use every so often.
Mentioned that in our first
So the
first one of these, I think it would have been good for Steve to have some resilience in his deck, and it's not in that. Yeah.
Unflinching Persistence isn't currently in because that was in the First Blood. I mean that for me is like if you put Atrium Bats back in, which there's no real reason not to, that kind of has to go back in at the same time. It's a nice way to try and marry that up. You try and run away with your bats, I try and come to close, I hit you with my Island of Yaros type thing. I don't know whether or not things like Masochism, people don't really use them anyway.
I mean,
like some cool
I have a friend who's going to be very sad that you're not bringing that card back. He'll be very, very sad.
I don't think it's not coming back. It's just, again, like that's a card you can't really put in a precon.
Yeah.
Because it's a lot of text.
That I'm looking at the Celebrity New Blood deck list right now.
Yeah, Redacted is definitely in there.
Yeah.
Is Redacted also in there?
No,
they won't even tell me if Redacted is there.
A lot of reprints. I can see a lot of reprints there.
Nice.
And some new.
But you get your what you wanted comes back as well as the other Redacted. So that's good news for you there. Just really enjoy that. So I hope you buy 20, 30 copies. Got to pay for the tariff to get them across.
I mean, by that time, I will hopefully have an influx of money. So there will be quite a few that I intend to.
Do you need to pay tariffs if you come to Europe? Personally.
Well, at some point, the airline tickets might just be cheaper than the tariffs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you technically still need to declare that at some stage when you go back.
Yes, you do.
But we used to have one of our friends used to do that for Brazil. So Fernando, back in the day, used to pick stuff up and take it with him to try and at least make it easier. So when we did the Berlin little show, he took a load back with him. We do have a card I see there marked that probably needs new art on the delivery, which makes sense. So that should be a good one to get back in the game. I think they are going to be different enough from Venturi with these cards back in for them.
I feel like they're pretty close to being different enough. I do think the little push will probably help.
I guess for us, right, it's try a merge. It's not quite the right phrase, but like Valerian and a beer, try it.
Yeah.
Here you go. That's fortitudinal specs. Try and make that work in a way that's exciting and stimulating.
Why decide kind of though to go that way? Like they both kind of have a very specific feel to them in general. Like the I guess you don't really. I feel like you guys get to control some of the implementation or the expression of them, but wouldn't one form of it be more the Valerian side, and one combination be more of the Valerian side, and one combination be more of the Obey side?
Yeah,
yeah,
more or less.
Okay, is that kind of the thought behind the implementation as it is?
Yeah, not all Celebrity are healers. Some of them are sort of warriors or seek vengeance, stuff like that.
Oh, I mean in the way that the disciplines appear, the discipline usage appears behind the cards, like using, maybe the Auspex Fortitude in the Obey conceptual way, and the Dominate Fortitude as the more Valerian kind of way. I don't know if that's an expression that comes down from Paradox's design.
I don't think the amalgams are that signposted.
Okay.
Like that. So I guess that's probably the biggest difference when I think about when I used to play a lot of World of Darkness back in the 90s, right? You had a huge amount of source books and loads of them, particularly when you could flick through them and some stuff was really very detailed expressed, quite rules driven. Other stuff was a bit more, here's this melting pot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they've released a lot of stuff, and Renegade have produced a lot of stuff since taking it on as well. But I think it's still more open-ended.
Okay.
And for us, it's well, and certainly when I look at the design team, which I don't really do anything with apart from smile at them and just get told what I'm printing when. I think that they try and make it interesting and fun whilst matching to that World of Darkness modern view as well. So I think you're always trying to look at that, like, you know, I think we mentioned this before as well. Like the new blood decks are designed to do something slightly different from the main deck. So your Slewbury current deck, right? That's a tap and bleed old school, right? To some degree, or block deny, however you want to think about that. The new blood is not. So it's perhaps a bit more orientated to the hitting. So if that gives you an idea of where it's going.
Yeah, fun.
Doesn't have resilience in it though, sadly. Sorry, Carl. But I think you already knew that.
Prevent 3 non-ag though is so nice.
It is. So I think we see how those go, and then, you know, we'll see how the path implementation works for the bat stuff as well, because that looks really cool. What the team have done on that to make it interesting and kind of playable.
Yeah.
And just, I just want more Smeese. So give me more Smeese, ideally with superior dominance, superior animalism, so I can thoughts betrayed you, conquer the beast, and teach you a lesson. Maybe a mythic form if I'm feeling really expensive. What Ben hasn't given me yet is a modern Dragos, which I don't really understand why not. I think it's a very reasonable request. Has to have superior dominate and superior protein. I would accept the basic animalism. I think that's reasonable. If you only want to give me a 5 cap with that ability, that's fine to have the basic animalism.
So what about a 3 cap with superior protean and Dragos? Well, 4 cap with superior protean and Dragos' ability.
It's all right, but I really, really either need to dominate, so I still haven't wasted the mythic form, or
so we need to
else.
print dominate skill cards.
Yeah, and all the skill cards should be done, in fairness. I think more likely
they could be put up on print on demand. If
I don't see any reason not to re-wedge. I need to see which ones are missing, and we can try and wedge some of them in the draft kit or other things. It feels weird putting them in like an anthology set.
I think Presence is missing.
So Seal of the Dartha Hue. There's one for you.
So we have to be a bit careful with named cards. So it just depends where they came from. I don't know. So we have a really good working relationship with Paradox, but like a couple of named cards definitely don't exist, right? Didn't think about that until we'd submitted them. So like Shreknet was an example of, oh yeah, right, that doesn't exist like that because they're all now scared of mobile phones because they're going to get caught and found by the Inquisition.
But does it really not exist?
Anyway, that's up to the storytellers to decide. So we need to check that, like what's the source, where did it come from, etc. If they're made up, then it's kind of fine. And we've also checked with other things that we can get in. So like some things are allowed, but they won't be coming out until SPAT, so you have to wait.
Yeah, like camera phones and laptop computers are like feel like, like the Zemis. I was able with Living Mance to handle the fact that I could just slap plus bleed on my guys, but in terms of
well, it means no one else can do the same deck, basically.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I mean, good old Gangrel Anti-Tribu really liked having their camera phones and their bleed retainers and whatnot, and none of that is in. I think the bleed retainers are in the draft kit, so that's
they are. It is problematic, and the electronic devices not really.
Is it really a problem that? I mean, I think the deck worked fine, and if it's something only Tsumishi could do, like is that really a problem? Because other decks might find different ways, like putting in dominate skill cards to govern bleed, whatever.
Yeah, well, I
Dropping-
think Ministry would like it, right? Because it's super effective because they could basically do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Protean is the most cost-effective single discipline if you can put it in. Dominate is arguably up there as all right, but the Protean means your childs just sit there and wait. So I don't know. I don't think it's the end of the world, Carl. But I think
it's not. But I mean, in terms of new players,
yeah. Well, I think the way we
play Legacy, but really only have access to V5 cards, they're like if we can't get electronic equipment like that in, then perhaps a Legacy bundle that makes some of that available for the new players who want to play the Legacy.
I think that
events.
In the same way we did with the events, right? Because we couldn't. So the reason why the events didn't scope on POD singly, like at that stage, that was before we had AGR stroke GamePod, so it was don't know when this is going to happen or how this is going to happen. So for 60% of the player base, it's difficult to get hold of. It's still hard for about 15% of the player base, something like that, to get from GamePod or drive through. So it's nice to be able to do something on a bundle that you can at least put in certain things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I've got plenty of camera phones and laptop computers, but
I know, coming out of my orifices exactly, but not everyone does, right? And like in the UK, we have one big giant box that was at Mike's house that moves around with all these cards you give out. And they had a baby, so that was being split up a bit. So we still have lots of cards we can give out to new players, but then you have to remember to bring it. I can remember 15 years ago, you used to drag bits of box to events to give out cards, but if you forget, you don't have them. It just doesn't happen. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of the useful thing about secondhand sellers as well. Like things like that are fairly easy to get, but it does make it less accessible, right?
Yeah, it is. I think the only way I can say that this game has ever been hurt is that there isn't substantial card value per individual card. So it was never something that you could get like a store that regularly had access to because card disparity values don't exist and there's not really a buy-sell market behind it. And with the current iteration, it's even harder now, but it's easier to get access to the individual cards overall because the total cost per card is, I mean, dramatically diminished. It's just the initial investment to get those cards if they're not on POD and you're in the wrong region. But if your group can split, it still works out to roughly the same. And I think when you guys do the draft kit, that will also affect and bring down things pretty dramatically. Because it should be a card pool that more people are interested in. And even if you omit the value of the vampires on the top of it, the rest of the cards will still be within a reasonable range for what they would be if you wanted to get them singly.
Yep.
Yeah. It does remind me of the stuff I haven't put up on drive through yet.
I should be going. I should be going to the hospital.
Mm-hmm. We can wrap this up.
And
see you around.
Hope she gets well soon.
Yep.
If else to me. Yeah, I need to put some stuff up. Yeah. I will see you guys soon. Thank you very much.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for this, obviously.
Thank you. All right. Have a great time.
Again, hopefully.
Indeed.
Don't make the thing. All right. Cheers then. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye.